Imagine waking up tomorrow to discover that every country on Earth is officially in debt. Not some, not most, all of them. From the richest superpower to the poorest developing nation, everyone owes money. Now ask the obvious question that almost nobody asks. If everyone owes, who is everyone paying? Because debt, by definition, has two sides, a borrower and a lender, a debtor and a creditor. But when every government, every corporation, every household, and even future generations are drowning in obligations, the creditor side seems to disappear into thin air. So who really owns a world when everything is owed to someone? That mystery hidden in plain sight is what we're uncovering today. And the answer is far more unsettling than a list of billionaires or secret families. To understand who owns the world now, we have to start long before modern banks, long before central banks, and even before money itself. Debt didn't begin as numbers on screens. It began as social obligation. In ancient Mesopotamia, over 4,000 years ago, farmers borrowed grain from temples. If the harvest failed, they fell into debt bondage, sometimes for life. Entire families could be enslaved not because of war, but because of interest. This became such a problem that early rulers like Hammurabi regularly declared debt jubilees, wiping the slate clean to prevent society from collapsing. That's our first pattern. Unchecked, debt doesn't stabilize societies, it destroys them. Debt always concentrates power upward, and when it concentrates too much, rulers are forced to reset it, or lose control. Fast forward to ancient Rome. Rome didn't collapse because it lacked gold. It collapsed because debt hollowed out the middle class. Small farmers borrowed to survive, lost land to elites, and became tenants or soldiers for hire. Wealth consolidated. Political power followed. By the time Rome fell, the world wasn't owned by emperors alone, it was owned by creditors. For centuries, debt remained personal and limited. Kings borrowed from merchants. Merchants borrowed from guilds. Money was scarce, physical, and constrained. That changed in the late Middle Ages. Italian city-states like Venice, Florence, and Genoa invented something revolutionary: state debt markets. Governments issued bonds. Citizens funded wars and infrastructure. Debt became tradable. This was the moment debt stopped being a burden and became a product. Then came the real turning point. In 1694, England founded the Bank of England. It didn't just store money, it created money by lending to the government. Here's the trick that changed the world. Money was issued as debt first, not value first. Currency entered the economy already owed back, with interest. From that moment forward, ownership began to separate from labor, land, and production, and move toward control of credit. The Industrial Revolution supercharged this system. Factories needed capital. Governments needed armies. Empires needed ships. Banks provided credit and charged interest. Debt fueled growth. Growth demanded more debt. And soon, borrowing wasn't a last resort, it was normal. By the 20th century, debt had reached a new scale. World War I bankrupted Europe. Governments borrowed beyond imagination. Gold-backed money couldn't keep up. Then came the Great Depression. In response, governments made a fateful decision. They would no longer let money be limited by gold. Instead, money would be backed by confidence and debt. After World War II, the Bretton Woods system tried to impose order. The US dollar became the global reserve currency, theoretically backed by gold. But in 1971, that final anchor snapped. The US ended gold convertibility. From that moment on, every major currency became pure debt. No commodity backing. No natural limit. Just promises stacked on promises. And the world entered the age of permanent indebtedness. Here's where the illusion deepens. When people hear global debt, they imagine rich countries owing other rich countries. China owing the US owing Japan. Governments owing each other in a giant loop. But zoom out. Most government debt is owed to institutions, not people. Central banks, commercial banks, pension funds, insurance companies, asset managers, and who owns them? Shares, control, voting rights. Ownership becomes abstract, buried under layers of funds, trusts, and legal entities. Debt doesn't point to a single villain. It points to a system where ownership is detached from responsibility. When money is created as debt, someone must always owe more than exists. That means system-wide debt can never be fully repaid. Not mathematically, not logically. Someone must always remain in obligation. By the late 20th century, the system reached a critical tension. Governments rolled over debt instead of paying it. Corporations borrowed to buy back shares. Households financed basic life with credit cards and mortgages. Debt no longer funded growth, it funded maintenance. Then came 2008. The global financial crisis wasn't caused by greed alone. It was caused by a system that required every expanding debt to survive. When borrowers couldn't pay, governments stepped in. They didn't erase debt. They transferred it from banks to public balance sheets. Private losses became public obligations. The result, global debt didn't shrink, it exploded, and that leads us to the most dangerous phase of all. When a system reaches a point where debts cannot be repaid, something crucial happens. The debt doesn't disappear, it changes form. Historically, societies have only had a few ways to deal with unpayable debt. 1. Default. 2. Inflation. 3. Austerity. 4. War. 5. Reset. Modern systems avoid default at all costs because it reveals the truth instantly. So instead, they choose the quieter options, the ones most people don't notice until it is too late. The most common choice. Inflation. Inflation is not just rising prices. It is a transfer mechanism. It quietly moves value from savers to debtors, from wages to assets, from the public to the system that issued the debt. When governments inflate, they not erasing debt, they shrinking the real value of what is owed. And this leads us to the uncomfortable reality. Inflation is how debt-heavy systems survive without admitting failure. Let's connect this to the present. Every major economy today runs on rolling debt. Governments don't plan to pay it off, they plan to service it forever. Households are encouraged to borrow for education, borrow for housing, borrow for consumption. Corporations are rewarded not for productivity, but for leverage. Financial markets rise not because value is created, but because liquidity is injected. This creates a strange paradox. The more debt there is, the more wealth appears to exist. But it's an illusion. Most modern wealth is paper wealth, claims on future income that hasn't been earned yet. When interest rates rise, the illusion cracks. When rates fall, the illusion grows. This cycle repeats because the system has no exit. Every debt crisis produces solutions: debt restructuring, stimulus packages, monetary easing, fiscal discipline. But notice something strange. The solutions always preserve the system that caused the problem. Central banks print more money. Governments promise reforms. Markets are stabilized. But the underlying logic, money as interest-bearing debt, remains untouched. Why? Because changing that logic would collapse the power structure built on it. Debt is not a bug. It's the control mechanism. Those who control credit decide which industries survive, which governments are responsible, which populations must sacrifice. The world isn't owned by kings anymore. It's governed by balance sheets. History shows us a brutal pattern. Debt expands faster than real productivity. Eventually, servicing debt consumes society. The middle class erodes. Political instability rises, trust collapses, and then comes the reset. Sometimes it's dramatic revolutions, collapses, currency deaths. Sometimes it's slow decades of stagnation, declining living standards, and silent wealth transfers. But no debt-based system has ever lasted forever. Not Rome, not medieval Europe, not imperial Spain, not the gold standard. The only question is how the reset arrives. So, who owns the world when everyone owes everything? Not governments, not billionaires, not even banks, in the traditional sense. The real owner is the structure itself. A system where money is created as debt. Debt requires perpetual growth. Growth requires resource extraction, and failure is socialized. Ownership becomes abstract, legal, and invisible. You don't see chains, you see contracts. You don't see rulers, you see policies. You don't see force, you see compliance. The future is owned not by people, but by obligations written into the present. 3 clear takeaways. 1. Debt is never neutral. It always redistributes power upward and forward in time. 2. Ownership today is about control of credit, not assets. Those who decide who gets funded decide who survives. 3. The system depends on belief. As long as people trust the promises, the system holds. When belief breaks, everything changes quickly. The most dangerous myth is that this system is permanent. It isn't. Every generation assumes the rules they inherit are natural. History shows they're temporary. The real question isn't, will the system change? It's who will bear the cost when it does. Because resets don't destroy debt equally. They choose winners and losers. If this video changed how you see money, debt, or ownership, like the video, it tells the algorithm this conversation matters. Subscribe for more deep dives into hidden financial history, and comment below. Do you think the next reset will be slow or sudden? Because once you see how the system works, you can't unsee it. And the first step toward freedom is understanding who really owns the world and why.